Oh, we're not recording. Now we are recording. Before we get into Tuisna's presentation, I just wanted to do a couple announcements. The first being the next Ipccwg gathering is August 13th, 1 p.m. Pacific. The last two recordings are up on our YouTube channel. Just Google Ipccwg or Indigenous Peoples Climate Change Working Group on the YouTube. And we should come up. We are working on a website, hopefully have that live soon, and everything will be there. But in the meantime, you can also find the recordings on the Southwest CASC website, the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center website, as well as registration links. Please subscribe to our newsletter to learn more about these gatherings, as well as other initiatives going on across the Southwest. The same goes for the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. And then the other quick announcement I wanted to make was for the National Tribal Indigenous Climate Conference, which is now virtual. This will take place September 14th through the 17th. I just wanted to highlight some of the speakers that will be participating in the conference. The individuals can be seen on the right. Registration will be free. Session proposals are due August 7th, in which you can submit for a training, a presentation, climate cafe, or a working group meeting. And we did want to highly encourage students to submit, to present their work or their posters via the presentations or for the climate cafe. Any questions that you have, you can email intic@nau.edu, and they also have a website. The link is down below. I can put that into the chat box here soon. But be sure to visit their website to register and submit any proposals that you would like to share at the gathering. And without further ado, I wanted to introduce you to our speaker today. Tuisna Rose Mills is from the Eastern Shoshone, Yakima, Umatilla Nations from Washington and Wyoming. She is currently studying and helping teach in the Film and Media Studies Department at the University of Kansas. She plans to collaborate her degrees in Indigenous Studies and Film and Media to produce a documentary series that would allow the histories of Indigenous people to be told from our own perspectives. A quote from Tuisna: "I strongly believe everyone has a story to be told, and it is our responsibility as Indigenous people to have it heard and expressed from our point of view." So I will pass the mic over to Tuisna, and you can begin sharing your screen. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Okay, thanks. Let me see here. Pull up my screen. And okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Tuisna Rose Mills. I'm from the Eastern Shoshone Yakima Umatilla Nations. I was asked by Sharina, my good friend from Sharina, we alumni from Haskell Indian Nations University, to talk on behalf of Nisqually Watershed, because where I grew up in Franks Landing in Olympia, Washington, there in the mouth of Nisqually River, with numerous families. With the numerous tribes. There's actually 29 federal recognized tribes in Washington. And amongst those that I grew up with, there was the Nisqually, the Puyallup, and Squaxin Island, which my families, who I'll begin to talk about, and how I actually became a part of the Nisqually Watershed. Now I want to introduce myself and my family. I was born in Yakima, Washington, 1983. That year, commenced the 104th birthday of Billy Franks Sr., who I'll soon share, but he's the one who had Franks Landing. He bought the 6 acres after in 1917, when Nisqually had 70 acres had been condemned to what is now Fort Lewis. So the east side of the river, that was all condemned for the government. So the Nisqually people had to go up 10 miles. Billy Franks Sr. ended up buying with the land, the money that he got from the being removed. He bought the 6 acres there on the mouth of the Nisqually River there, going into the delta of the Puget Sound. So I'm going to start off with my parents are Brady Leroy Mills he was born in Nespeland, Washington, but he grew up in Yakima, and whose little brother married Suzette Bridges, which is my auntie and my who's the granddaughter of Billy Frank Sr. So that's how I became part of the Franks Landing Indian community. The Nisqually, being raised on the Nisqually River was because of my dad's little brother came out there after coming out of the Vietnam War. He went back home, and he ended up residing there, Franks Landing, and helping with the fishing struggles and the fishing wars of the 60s and 70s, and which resulted in my family moving back. I believe it was 1988. I was only 4 or 5 years old. We first lived on the riverbank, which I wasn't aware of at the time. We didn't have a place to go. It was home living on the riverbank of the Nisqually River. It was normal for us. I always wondered why we didn't get to ride the bus for school, because we would have in the morning. We got up in the morning, and sometimes if I was lucky enough, I got to cast a few casts in the fishing in the river. But most of the time, we got up, and my dad would take us across the river of the east side, and he would take us to Wahelu Indian School in a river. So our first bus was a boat that was like a steel boat, but that he pushed over in a big pole that was the families there on Franks Landing, and that's how we got to school every day. And I remember smelling of fish, and I used to hate it, but now I love the smell of the fish and the smell of the oil, the smell of the river. It reminds me of home. And though I'm enrolled in Eastern Shoshone, I grew up in Yakima, my heart and my home will always be the Nisqually River, will always be Franks Landing, because of, how I grew up with my aunties and my uncles. And again, Wahelu Indian School, which I'll talk about here shortly, is, where we went to school. It's our family's school, and it's where, and there was all these people, Indian people, non-Indian people, other minorities came together, and to make a difference, to help the indigenous people that were having treaty rights, broken upon them. And so with that, I would like to say again, I forgot to mention my mother, Caroline Mills, who was from Fort Washakie, Wyoming, on the Red River Reservation. And I start with them two, my family, my mom and dad, is because when I was born into that. But if it wasn't for the Creator placing me into the family where I am and where I've been, I wouldn't become who I am today. And that's, not knowing that my family and what they did and what they were going through before I was born and even after, I didn't realize the importance of it. I just thought, oh, well, this is normal, going to rallies and fighting for rights as Indians. Because as little kids, my earliest memory was to go to these rallies, and it was something we had to do, and it was fun because we got to roller skate and play. And I remember going to numerous rallies and protests for Indian rights, and that's what it mostly was for treaty rights that were being broken. And that's where my parents met, was on the Treaty Trail, was 1976. And I'm going to start my thing here. In 1976, was the Trail of Self-Determination. And in Lawrence, Kansas, my auntie, who wasn't my auntie at first, she was my, she came to be, hold on, I'm sorry, there we go. Anyway, she came, and it was during the Sovereign Native Women's Conference in 1976, which my mom met my father. She just graduated high school, and he was there speaking, and he's 10 years older than her, and which drew her into, being infatuated with him and how he spoke, because Indian men at that time did not speak with such eloquence, and, how I guess the word sovereignty comes up, because I heard that word all the time, and she just told me that Indian men didn't talk like that with a vocabulary such as his, and so it intrigued her, and so she jumped on the trail of 1976 to self-determination to DC, and that resulted in them getting married a year later. On this day, July 16th, 1977, they were married on Franks Landing with Kaya, what you see in this this brochure, and it's the original brochure that my mom kept, and I thank her for everything that the knowledge, and just like our elders, we listen to these stories. Well, sometimes, and to pass things on and to remember them, we have physical evidence, and this was from the 1976 brochure pamphlet that my mom had gone to. And there's my Aunt Suzette fighting in the, on the corner there, and there's Kaya, and that's you see her there. But I just want to share this because Kaya, she's my great grandmother, or my great grandmother, Suzette's great grandmother, my aunt's, and that's the prayer we pray to, is we pray to her, to our grandmothers. And of course you got your grandmother Moon, the ocean, you got a lot of grandmothers and grandfathers out there, but to her specifically, we pray to her for her guidance. And I'm just going to read that short poem if you can't read it already. It says, "To Kaya, from whom we have drawn unlimited strength, wisdom, and patience. It is you, Kaya, that we turn to when we are sick or alone or troubled or afraid. Thank you, Kaya, for your guidance to the good way of the life as passed from Kaya." So again, this is represents a lot to me, because it not shows a reunion of Indian people, but of all of us as Indian people coming together. And I'm not trying to, it's hard to, I guess you could say, get all the Indian history, because again, this is just a sliver, just a small section of Indian history that needs to be told, that has to be told. And I'm just a little sliver of this sliver. So, and I would like to, before these elders pass on, it's good to know these stories, even if it's just a story of what your uncle or auntie or grandpa's or grandma said. There's truth to that. And there's research. If you go look in your research in the newspaper articles, they will be there. But yeah, so after my parents have met in 1976, the Trail of Self-Determination, what happened is they came, and this is my mother. She joined. It says 186 years of oppression. It is time for this genocidal sadism to stop. Now, she told me she didn't really understood some of them words. Again, she just graduated high school, but she knew the importance of coming together, and she didn't want to go home to Wyoming, because of during those times, and it was harsh for Indian people, especially those in isolate reservations there. But women, matriarch women in our families, such as Kaya, Princess Angeline, Suzette, Angeline Tobin, or Angeline Frank, I'm sorry, Mesa Bridges, Teresa Mesa Bridges, who I will speak about here shortly in the thing. But these women, matriarch women, Janet McLeod, Ramona Bennett, there are so many women, so many men, so many non-Indian people that have helped, that have come together to support Frank's Landing, the Nisqually tribes, the Puyallup, when the Puyallup encampment was going on in 1970, when the Cushman would take over, the Cascadia takeover of the old, I remember it as the old high school as Chief Lashai, but it was the Indian Health Center. And I believe in 1974, there was a lot of things going on in 1974. So I'll go pull that back here. But so with my mom, and I do want to share this part right here with what I have here is the Trail of Self-Determination. What they were wanting to go over there and discuss was the services and how Indians were being treated. And these were the points that they, if I'm going too fast, I'm sorry. You could always, and I want to emphasize the story map that I'm using. As Indian people, we have to be wary of data sovereignty and how we use or how we don't use non-Indian technology. And with some of the technology I use, I was trying to upload my films that I made with Jean Saunders. I'm sorry, I don't know your last name now, Jean. Her interviews from the 70s with Sapa, or with Billy Frank Jr., Kwalashkit. He did a bunch of interviews, and I wanted to upload them, but I didn't want the story map to own the copyrights, to own these things as Indian people that we need to be consider of, like our prayers, our songs, some things we can share, some things we can't. So we need to be wary of our data sovereignty and what it is okay that we can share. There's boundaries that we have that need to be addressed at all times. So I will upload on my Vimeo when I finish the film of these things. So because I know that it's okay to share, but again, I don't want other people or other this technology story maps to own my great-grandfather's or my family's prayer or the songs like that. So I just want you to keep that in mind when we do these presentations, when we go and share our songs and our prayers. I wanted to say our prayer, but when you said you were being recorded, I was like, "Ooh, okay, well, hold on, that might cause a problem." So I unfortunately, I can't upload the films because of that, but I will upload them to my Vimeo account and I will share those in a later date. But the reason why I want to talk about this self-determination trial and why these points were so important, but mainly because if you see down here and you see Sid Mills, you go, where is it at? Where's Billy Franklin? Oh, right there. Bill Franklin, Frank's Landing. I'm guessing that's Washington, the Nisqually tribe. But the reason why I went to media and film media studies is because one, our histories are so important, but they're never told from us. They're never told for us. I mean, they're never told about from us. So they're always told about us and for us. And so I think that needs a change. And because of this U.S. document that's in here, his name is just misspelled. Bill Franklin. I know his name's Frank, but and to me that's very important. To me, it's like, well, they don't care. Just like in some of the reactions of the government, it's may not be important to them, but it is darn important to us, and it's very important for us to correct them, to make sure our histories are right, to make sure our data sovereignty is protected, and who we are and where we come from. And it's okay to share, and it's okay, but it's not okay to, again, like our lands, like our ways, to have it taken from us. I don't want that. And so that's why we always have to be wary. And that's why I became part of wanting to start a documentary series, is because our stories need to be shared. They need to be heard, expressed from us and for us. And who else better than us? And I remember Grandma Maisel, Teresa's Bridges, she would say, "Hey, no one's going to do it for us. No one's going to do it for us but us. So we got to do it for ourselves." And so I always think of that when I think of her. She stood up. She was the matriarch of Frank's Landing at during the 60s and 70s. My aunts, Valerie Bridges, who passed away in 1970, she helped, all these women, these matriarchs, all these women, the words that they encouraged, the words that they said, what they did, Yetzi Blue, Janet McLeod, Tulalip, and again, I have all these books that my parents, I kind of took them, but I read them, and I read what they were reading from them times, and I look at stuff like this. Hold on, let me grab it. Annotated Indians, criminal, what else is it? Books like these that they took from libraries. My father and took 1970, took these and used them against the government. And my dad used to say the most powerful thing in the world is the educated Indian. Use what they, use what their weapons against them. So that's what they did. They took these books and they took the knowledge that, that the government gave them, and they used it against them, and they used it. And the best part about it is let me go back to my slideshow here, is they used it to promote themselves. And again, this is in the July 4th, 1976. Again, a lot of people helped up. There's my two uncles there, Chipmunk, Yakima, Jimbo Mills, who married a Quinault Indian, Annabelle Grover. And we used to go up there every summer, 4th of July, to, be with families. So again, a lot of Indian people in so many in ways are related and connected. And it's really crazy how you see these. And my mom, she gave me this picture to use in I'm grateful. Again, these pictures say so much. Jane Fonda here supporting Indian tribes. Again, you had like Dick Gregory, you had Marlon Brando, you had people in these people who had were famous, and they came and helped Indian people because they saw the wrongdoings and the injustice that was going on. And that's what's very important to, I mean, it's not that we, we needed their help, we needed their voice, but we also appreciated the cause that they, brought awareness to, bigger awareness. It made the public understand, made the public see what was going on behind, on the rivers, behind in the dark, because we couldn't do the things that we were allowed to do, that the treaties said that we could do. So again, I just want to emphasize the importance of these pictures, of these stories, of these small pieces of paper that you think are irrelevant. They are stories, they are history to our people. And I have this piece of paper here because, again, today marks I'm bad at math, but in 1977, on this day at Frank's Landing, my parents tied the knot, and you see in the background, that's the invitation. It's simple, it's the wedding invitation, just simple words. But I want to read the symbol that represents such a huge unification between the people and Indian tribes. It says on the cover of my mother's wedding invitation was, the cover design was created by Sally Ipccwg. And you can see that's the portion in the back of that, my mom's wedding picture there. The porpoise represents the advanced culture of the coastal tribes, and the war shield represents the survival of the plains tribes. Joined in harmony with the circle of life, the design represents and emphasizes the strength found in the unity of Indian people everywhere, as typified by this marriage. So, yeah, so like it all started not just before my parents, and and our ancestors, our Utwais, our pastaways. So I look at these, and thank you, Mom, for that, and happy anniversary to Dad and Evan, but I wanted to say that we look to these little things, and during that time, you see these people, and this was their marriage certificate. Now, I look at their certificate of marriage, and my parents, my dad, he gave us the choice of what way we wanted to believe. My mom's Catholic, my dad, he was, I think, born, raised Catholic, but he didn't believe that way. So he went Native American church, Longhouse, Sweat Lodge, and he believed in the power of cultural reappropriation. So with this, the Puyallup tribes, the Mexican Treaty Nation, they were the second marriage certificate from the Puyallup tribe, and that signified their indigeneity, that signified, their, uplifting of saying, we are here, we're not going anywhere, and we do have the right to govern ourselves, to, be sovereign nations. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Not just, and you see witness there is Maisel Bridges, Suzette Mills, John Kleinbell, Ramona Bennett, Billy Frank Jr., and you see the Secretary Margarita Stroud and the chairperson at the time, Ramona Bennett. And these people all came together. I grew up with all these, a lot of these people, and aunties and uncles. And again, when I came to college, I didn't realize the importance of, wow, that's my family. So it's important for me to, I guess, to elaborate or to get the story out there. And again, I would love to go more into depth, but within an hour, I'm trying to squeeze in all this stuff. So there will be things I'll mention, but I won't go into, like the takeover Alcatraz in 69, the BIA takeover in 72, and the Wounded Knee in 73. Those were all significant during these times because my families were there. However, back to the Nisqually watershed, this is what was going on there. This is why I'm trying to keep it at the Nisqually watershed, because at the time there was so many tribal wars going, not tribal wars, but Indian nations fighting with the government. The rice wars up in Minnesota that my dad took part of, that I found a poem that he wrote talking about the flag of the United States. And And I found it actually in the U.S. books, annotated Indians book over there in the law book. And it's interesting, like, you know, how, and I was meant to find that. Sometimes you're meant to find things, and I could, again, I'll discuss that later, but I wanted to always emphasize how important it is as Indian people we stand up because we're not just U.S. citizens, as my dad would say. We are an Eastern Shoshone, Yakima Umatilla first. You know, that's who we're citizens of, and that's who I claim to be. Then we're U.S. citizens second. And so with them, before I go to Sapa and Kaya, with that, I just want to say, even my name, Twisna, meaning woman of the river, from the Yakima Nation, from the Klickitat River there. Our parents believed that, you know, since Indian names were taken from my dad's Indian name, Tuka, meaning mountain lion, and my mom's Bogumwaipa, meaning berry picker woman, these names were not their U.S. government names. So for them to take the appropriation, cultural appropriation, and give us our Indian names, give as our birth names, is a powerful statement right there, saying, I'm Twisna, this is who I am, this is where I come from. And so all my dad's brother Sid Mills, he also named all his kids Indian names. And you know, and a lot of us, I'm sorry, I get a little teared up here. So the reason why I just want to say thank you, but the reason why our names are so important is because, again, all these acts, all these things my parents did, saying, nope, you don't want to be Catholic? Okay, that's okay. You can believe in this way. That's a stand up against the government. You know, 1978, we finally got our rights to pray the way we want as Indians. And that's what, I wasn't born, but 1983, I had the choice. I didn't have to be baptized. I didn't have to go be Catholic. You know, I wanted to until I found out you had to go to another school after school. So, you know, but I tried. But anyway, no, I would just want to emphasize the importance of how important it is to, you know, have an Indian name, to name your kids, you know, Twisna, Bogumwaipa, Tanayapum, Sokaichi, you know, to have these Indian names, to have these Indian marriages, to, you know, to say, hey, we're Indian. And that's what my parents, what my families were about, was standing up against, you know, for who we were, who we want to be, and who we have the right to be as Indian people. And I'd like to bring it back to Sapa and Kaya here. That's Billy Frank Sr. and that's Angeline Frank. Those were Maisel Bridges' parents. And she had numerous siblings. I can't remember, Don McLeod, I think Rose Fitz. I have a family tree here. I don't know why I don't put my books over here, but yeah, there was a lot. But I just want to say, great book. I think everyone should read this book. It should be on everyone's educational list. But no, I want to say with Sapa here, you know, if it wasn't for him and what he did, he was born in 1879. And in 1983, when I was not too long after I was born, I think that summer, that fall, he ended up passing, but he was 104 years old, older than the state of Washington. He hung on to what we would, you know, what I know, like the songs, the prayers that my auntie passed down, Auntie Suzette, his granddaughter, Auntie Suzette Bridges or Mills, you know, and the prayer that I know. And the prayer, you know, I mean, I'm not going to say another thing, but I will, you know, when I say I'll say it in English, you know, it's thank you, grandfather, thank you, grandmother, thank you to the winds in the four directions, thank you to the mountain, or thank you to the thunders and the lightnings, thank you to the mountains, and thank you to the water that gives us life. Thank you to the heavens and earth and all my relations. Thank you. And though I'm being recorded, so I would have loved to have shared that with you in our language, but our family prayer and you know, those boundaries, again, I can't do that just because of the fact that it's technology, and I don't want my family prayer to be out there and owned by story maps. So I want to, so with that, I want to say thank you to Kaya and Sapa, and I want to say, you know, if it wasn't for them and passing on what they knew and who they were and what they did as Indian people, my auntie would not be able to pass it down to me in the Sweat Lodge. And I say auntie as in Auntie Suzette, Auntie Allison when she was alive, Auntie, you know, all my Auntie Norma, all the Eagle speakers, you know, Auntie Norma, Auntie Billy, all the people who helped out at Wahil Indian School. You know, you think wasn't just these people who stood up. Like, it wasn't just the chairman, Ramona Bennett. It wasn't just Billy Frank Jr. It was everybody. It was numerous cousins, families, and that's what I want to incorporate. There's so many people to even name or even to put on a little credits list that you would even get to read them, because there's so many and continuously so many people here to help. And I just, again, just want to reach to my bottom of my heart to my Utwise, my passed aways, you know, that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here speaking in front of you about Frank's Landing, about the Squaw River, you know, about the importance of salmon, because like Yetzi Blue, Janet McLeod said that, you know, we are salmon people. You know, there was songs for each that came up the river. There were songs for every salmon that came up. There's 5 different species of salmon: coho, pink salmon, chinook, and the steelhead trout, and what's the other one? Chum. And you know, she said that there was so many coming up all the time that that we would have specific songs and specific ceremonies for them, like the first fish ceremony, where we go and the fish comes up the river and the community goes. We have everyone has a piece of it, and we send it back up, send it back up the current, representing, you know, for it to come back and spawn, to come back and have, you know, to feed our people, to have the sustenance to provide for our people, not just the nutrients, but, you know, our culture, and to give thanks for that. So, you know, and again, like I said, these matriarchal women, and the men as well, but I say the women because it was the women for me who stood up and said, okay, you got to get up there and do that. You know, because when the men went to jail in the 60s and 70s, it was the women that, it was my aunties, it was my grandmothers, it was my sisters, it was my cousins, all these women standing up and having to feed the children, having to go to jail because they were getting locked up and thrown in because they were just being Indian, feeding themselves, feeding their families, and trying to make a living being an Indian. And during those times, I think, you know, we owe it to Grandpa and Grandma and all our ancestors and all our Utwise and all those who passed on and who fought the good fights, you know. And I encourage those who have elders, who have people who were there during these times, to go and listen, go and voice record, memo. I know a lot of people got phones. You can hit that memo button and you'll have that story to share. You'll have that story to remember, you know. So I just want to emphasize the importance of that, and how we as Indian people lived according to the society, according to, not society, our society lived according to our environments. Like, again, Yetzi Blue said in one of the books, like it's right here, I believe, what's it called? I have so many books of my parents that it's, thank you, Mom, by the way. This one is called The Woman of the Native Struggle. And she just has a paragraph in here, but she says so much in that one paragraph. And plus she's in Yale, Washington, which is home for me as well. She talks about how there are a few things that you could, that people would be punished for. And if the things that would be punished for would be, nobody was allowed to be noisy or be loud or be angry when the salmon were spawning. And that's because she said they were, it was like a nursery, you know. And she also stated that in that one paragraph, she stated something that if a man was to urinate in the river, that was death by penalty. That was a penalty. There was death, you know. And so back in those days, we used to live according to our to the salmon, to our environment. And I want to share a brief story here that I will share on my Vimeo of one of my films I made for class here at KU, because it's Kaya, it's Grandma Angeline Frank, talking about how we used to live according to the humpback salmon. She called it the time to separate. So I'll play that for you guys here while we, let me see here. And
Can you turn it up a little, Twisna?
Go back together. And I said, well, that was a good excuse.
okay, hold on. Oh, whoops. And there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I should have checked the volume on that. But no, she talks about, I'll just repeat what she said. She talks about, you ever heard of the Hoodoo year, which is the humpback salmon? And that's when you separate. Did you ever hear of that story? She says. The Hoodoo comes into the river, the humpback salmon, then the men leaves their wives, or the wives leave their men. And that's, and she said, that's an excuse they had. She's like, but then they go back together. And then that's a good excuse, she said. She told the children that. So in Sapa, at the end of that recording, he says, once every 4 years, the Hoodoo comes upstream to, and so he was saying every 4 years, it was time for, you could be with your girlfriend or someone you were infatuated with. It was to cure insecurities, jealousy, stuff like that. So again, according to how we used to live according to our environments, and like the seasons, times change, and like technology, things changes, and we have to adapt. And I think that's great how again, thank you, Jean, for doing those in the 70s to record Kaya and Sapa like that. But yeah, let me go ahead and move back to the story map here so I don't have to. All right, so yeah, I'm sorry about that. So yeah, no, so Kaya, she was the one talking about that. And let me go ahead and talk about, let's see what the next one is. I can't see Tacoma. Okay, so this is where I grew up. This is Mount Rainier, Tacoma. That's the water that gives us life. Sapa he was telling a story about how us Indian Nisquallies came over and we lived on the other side of the glaciers there. And she told us, and I don't know what a lot of the words meant in Nisqually, but he said something about don't forget the water, take it with you, because that's why Mount Rainier here is called Tacoma. It's the lifeline of the people to the to the Nisqually watershed. So that's let's make sure I'm good on time here. Oh, but yeah, and that's how I came down Frank's Landing. And again, a lot of this stuff happened before I was born. I was born into this. I wasn't, and again, I didn't know that this wasn't what people didn't do. I thought all Indians did this. And I'm just going to share a brief, now this is really loud, so I know this is turned up. This is just a brief history of Frank's Landing. And my late Uncle Billy, or Grandpa actually, is on here. And you'll see Allison Gottfredson. She's not twice, she passed away too, but a lot of these things I found on in the internet. I'm sorry, I was gonna say Facebook, the internet, because or on YouTube, because one, it's already on YouTube. You won't get any copy. I mean, it's okay to use that. So if you don't want to use it, I suggest everything I pulled up was either from pictures of my own or I took from other places. So I just want to share this Frank's Landing, because I think this 3-minute video does it justice of to the understanding of what they went through, but most of all because you can't see the pictures or the film that I was trying to upload with the pictures and the storyline. This will give a better viewing of what you could expect here. Hold on.
Survival of the salmon is critical to the survival of the South Puget Sound Indian tribes.
But in 1962, here on the Nisqually, both the State Game and Fisheries Department began their heavy-handed mobilization of forces and arrest of all fishermen on the rivers. So in January 1962, when you had the steelhead running here and you had the chum salmon running, you had both departments down here arresting the fishermen.
They were just going out and fishing. They weren't clearing out an environmentally sensitive area to build a house. They weren't digging big holes for a deeper pool. You know, they weren't asking for a bigger home. They were just trying to eat. They were very poor people in the sense of the way we look at wealth and poverty even today and back then, but they just wanted to feed their children. But what's more astonishing is that they knew that they had a right to do that.
The Indian has always waited for the fish to get home. He wouldn't go out looking for them and trapping them and hunting them and netting them out there. He waited till they got home. Well, the non-Indian, he had the big boats and he owned the bank and everything, so he went out chasing the fish and he caught them before they come home. And when the salmon got home to the mouth of the Nisqually River, the state of Washington would close it down for conservation. And then the Indian tribes would all be closed down. Indians couldn't fish anymore. So that's where the confrontation started. You know, there was no win as far as us exercising our right anymore, or getting even enough fish for our food, for our ceremonies, or anything like that. So we went into a battle with the state of Washington over that.
Sometimes at night, I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there would be huge spotlights going up and down the river, and they'd be looking for my dad. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and there'd be 200, 300 game wardens all over the landing and running this way and that way, looking for my dad, from my uncle. Sometimes I'd come home and there'd be game wardens and Indians fighting, and my mom and dad was usually right in the middle of it.
Many of the Indian fishermen and women from Frank's Landing ended up being arrested 40 to 50 times for exercising their treaty rights. Finally, it ended up in federal court, with the United States government representing the Indians bringing a lawsuit against the state of Washington. The Indians won a decisive victory in what has been called the Bolt decision, named after the federal court judge who heard the case, Judge George Bolt. In addition to the right to catch up to 50% of the harvest, they were given a significant role in managing the resource.
Okay, yep. And so, again, that was like just a brief history lesson on Frank's Landing that I got off of YouTube. And again, it's just something that I thought would be able to share and condense in 3 minutes more than I could talk about, you know, individuals. And it gives you a good visualization of it as well. As I'm a visualizer, or I like to visualize, can't say visualize. Anyway, in 1974, and again, I have to skip through some of these, like the 69 takeover Alcatraz, 72 BIA takeover, the 73 Wounded Knee occupation, 1970 the Puyallup encampment raid, which resulted in the Washington state suing the state of Washington and breaking the treaty laws. So, which resulted in 1974 Bolt decision, which I'm going to discuss here after Wahilute, because Wahilute was also made during this time as Indian children were being mistreated at schools, and due to that, and it was just because we, you know, Indian fishing, it was fishing wars that were going on between state fishermen and Indian fishermen, and because of that, my grandma Teresa Maisel Bridges, founded Wahilute Indian School, and it where my parents both subbed. They were both sub teachers there, and they where I went to schools, and where a lot of my family still goes to school there. And this is my cousin Pau. He was the first one of the I think he was maybe 12 or 13 there when they were doing our reenactments. But the turtle you see on the bottom there represents strength. It's a symbol of Wahelu, and it represents, symbolizes the long life and strength of purpose and the endurance, which again, that our family has, continues to do. So Wahelu Indian School is still there. It's still, it's now public, I believe. It used to be private just for Indians, but now it is public. And the last one I'd like to, before I end it, because I know I want to give you guys minutes, I want to, and again, there's so much I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about the police force and how, and again, the 1974 Bolt decision, which was Judge Bolt. He significantly chose February 12th, 1974, to be on Lincoln's birthday, to make a statement, because this was one of the greatest moments in American law for Native Americans and for Americans in general, because of what it has done and opened up for Indians. So I just want you to know that Judge Bolt, he also got got death threats. He got mistreated. They wouldn't let him in clubs. He got socially blacklisted. And it was all for honoring the sacred promise allowed to dispossessed people to have what is most sacred to us, and that's our rights to be protected. And but he didn't want to stop that from what was happening. So he helped us become co-managers in the 50% harvestable catch of salmon. He helped us, be able to manage our own, regulate and manage our own conservation, to the salmon. And so I think that Judge Bolt is, he's right up there with great American heroes for Indian people, because it could have went both ways. And what made him so important to this is he listened to the elders. He literally listened to all indigenous people, all indigenous elders that came, and he listened to why it was important, why these trees were important, why the river, and why these environments were important to the Indian people to make finalize his decision in the Bolt decision, which ruled in favor for the Indians. And and I want to emphasize that it started today, not just what Billy Frank did, and what numerous Indians people of the Pacific Northwest, of Puget Sound, of the Olympia area, and Tacoma, all those areas in general. I just want to say that I owe it to the mothers, the grandmothers, to Kaya, to the matriarchal women, to help our men, to help, to be the backbone, to support, because if it wasn't for them, again, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be discussing what I'm here doing now. And hopefully I'll have a further presentation to where I can show my films that I was expressing, the photos and things that you don't see on the internet, because a lot of them were kept anyway. But yeah, I wanted to discuss VHS tapes, any kind of media, again, I work with everything. So everything can be considered a part of a story, a part of something that needs to be told. And with that, I just want to leave that with, in closing, with the words of the late and great Billy Frank Jr. He not only was my uncle because of his charisma, that he had these partnerships, and I'm saying partnerships with the state legislation, the U.S. government, on federal 3 levels, in Indian country, state, and the legislature, federal. So he did a lot of. He was a bridge. He gapped the bridge between the communication with his charisma and making you feel like family. Everyone was family to him. So, I always hear him in my head. There you go, my girl. So. It's, I just want to think of, before I end it with that, I just want to think of his sister, Teresa Maisel Bridges. My grandmother, she just passed away last night. And, I'm sorry that, I get emotional, but it's hard because, someone like that passes, but I just wanted to say, if you could have my family, her family in her prayers, the Puyallup Nation, the Squaw Nation, the Squaxin Island nations. You know, she was a huge part of them lives, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who came and listened, and most of all, thank to the people of the Squally watershed. You know, thank you for allowing me to come in your community, to be part of your community, and my families. And I wouldn't be here without you guys. But if you could have my grandmother, she's up there with Uncle Billy right now, you know, and she's up there with her daughters and her husband, Al Bridges, as my uncle said, don't forget Al Bridges, you know. And so I just want to emphasize that. If you guys want to help, or you guys want to look up anything, the salmondefense.org is a great way to have all these tribes. It's not just like the Northwest Indian Fishery Commission. It is all the tribes coming together, and this is what they the cartoon, or animation they came up with about the salmon. And it makes me so proud, because in his death, years after his death, he's still advocating for salmon. He's still standing up for the rights. He's still sticking up for them. And I think that's why I left this at the end. It was from the salmondefense.org, is because they went and found an animation ingenuity indigenous media project, or media people, and they came up with this animation that I am so proud of. And again, it's salmondefense.org, where all the tribes unified to help the salmon and the waters for us. So thank you, and I will questions after this.
We have got to think in the long term and think in the short term. We've got to think about it, all of us, for everyone. You go out and you pray to the moon, you pray to the sun. Talk to them trees. You know, you talk to that water, you see that tide going out, you see that tide coming in. You see the animals all swimming. You know everything is good when that's happening. When them animals come down to see you and talk to you and then leave and migrate out to the ocean. And then come back again next year. The salmon has to have access to that river, way up in the upper reaches of the watershed where the water's cold. They have to come migrate back out to sea, and then they get to the ocean. They go clean up the Aleutian Islands. Stars guide them back here. Stars guide them right back to that river. The Indian had everything here. The Indian had his medicine. The Indian had his drums and his music. He was in art, he was in dancing, he had everything. We knew the white man was coming over the mountain long before he ever got here. And we welcomed him. What sustained him here? What sustained him? The salmon sustained his life. He was hungry. When he was starving to death, but there was so much food, he didn't know what was poison and what wasn't until the Indian told him. He didn't even know how to catch fish. He didn't know how to survive. He did survive, but the Indian was the help along the way. We don't walk on this earth very long. We got a lot of changes that are happening here in this century. We have to work together and remind each other about what was the past and our history, be able to live together and survive together. Help your tribes and help your people. Be something that you can spend a lifetime helping. And you can make a difference. You can make a big difference in the world, just one person. If you got a thought process of a long, long thought into the next 100 years. So it never stops, it continues on. We've always been told that we got a short time on this earth as we walk. So try to make things better as you walk on this earth.
Thank you, Twisna, so much. Happy anniversary to your mother and your father in the happy land, and our condolences to your family and your grandmother's loss. And at this time, we will open it up for questions for Twisna. Paulette? You're on mute.
Muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good now.
Okay, thank you for sharing these incredible history and stories, because sometimes we don't know how we get to where we're at. One of the things that Twisna didn't really talk about a whole lot is that the Nisqually watershed now is one of 2 of the most pristine restored watersheds in the United States. 2 on the entire west coast of the United States that have been restored from the ocean to the glacier. And the amount of work that her family and the tribes in those communities up there put into the relationship building and collaborations between federal, state, local municipalities, tribes, private landowners, the U.S. Army, the federal government, was incredible. It's monumental, the amount of collaboration. I mean, they literally have programs now where tribal elders will come out to the watershed, meet some college students, and sit down with elementary or middle school kids and teach them about planting certain plants in the watershed at that certain area, why that plant is important in that space at that time, teaching them how to do water testing and monitor the runoff from farms. And I mean, so this has become an incredibly unique collaboration of caring for a watershed by multiple people that was started by the tribes in this region. So when we talk about climate and we talk about treaty rights, and Twisna said, you know, the right to care for their land, they literally had to fight, not only to take care of themselves and feed themselves, but to care for the land in a way that had been completely decimated almost through pollution and clearing out the streams and creating a pasture at the where the ocean and at the tide marsh, where the ocean and the river meet at the bottom of the watershed. And they literally had to like rebuild these meandering streams, replant native plants, replant log jams. I mean, I was blessed to get an opportunity to be given a tour of the Nisqually watershed, and they took us, you know, up to the glacier and down through different parts of it. And I got to see the school children interacting with elders and scientists and see the investment that the whole community had in tearing up their backyard to build log jams. So, I mean, for me, this is like the epitome of not only the history of why colonialism and this violenced place has happened historically, but the love of the people and the collaboration and relationships and the hard work and lives lost along the way and fighting and stuff, it took to just be allowed to care for place again and to create an environment that the eagles came back, the salmon are coming back, and they've got their own fishery, and they're working so hard to save who they are, which is the salmon and the land and the water. And it's, to me, the most important example of what can happen and what can be done if we work together, if we learn from each other, if we look, for the long term of, everybody's has to buy into place to survive climate extremes and variability and change. So when we start talking about these histories, these tribes knew what it took to survive in this place and what the salmon needed. That was their family. And so for anybody that's still, with us and stuff, I really hope you take a moment. I put a link. There's so much more information out there about the Nisqually watershed, and Billy Frank Jr. and all the people that Twisna mentioned are incredibly instrumental in not only preserving this watershed, but preserving the rights of all Indigenous people to hunt and fish in their traditional methods, in their traditional places, and upholding fishing and hunting rights of Indigenous peoples. So, I mean, what she spoke about these histories, they're so much more powerful than sometimes we even know, because it's not taught in school. And they should be, because these are monumental acts that not only preserved, the treaty rights and made the government uphold its end of the bargains, but also these are foundational components of how we as scientists and researchers and scholars and Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people need to look at. These are the examples we need to look at how we need to apply ourselves to our projects, our homelands, to preserve and restore and bring back what has been destroyed over the lifetimes prior to us. And Twisna, I'm grateful for your stories, and because it's so much history to try to shove into an hour. I get it and stuff, but you didn't even get to talk about how these things are informing where the watershed is today, which is one of the most shining examples of what can be done if science, community, and science and society merge. And tribes have to lead that. They have to be completely instrumental in that process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. Any other questions for Twisna? Comments? All right. Well, if not, we will. We want to thank you, Twisna, for sharing your time and your knowledge, experience with us, your stories. A huge thank you to you, Himakas Katiayo. And yeah, and everybody else, thank you for joining us, and we will see you all next month.
All right.
Thank you.
Hands go up to you. Do we stay on? Or?
I think we're good. Everybody's saying thank you in the chat box. I will download the chat box, and if there's any follow-up, I will make sure to let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and thanks so much.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I'll actually, when I get that down, I'll send it to Sharina, and she could probably
yeah, nice job. Congratulations. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Good job.
Oh man, it was so hard.
Hi, Lori. It's so great to see you. Gosh.